Danielle, welcome to Hull.
Thank you.
We can now say we're to Hull and back officially.
Yeah.
We had a very nice time here.
Yeah,
We had a lovely time.
Yeah.
We had lunch out by the bridge on the river. Very beautiful place.
So we chocolate cake.
We both like we both do Hull. Now, one of the reasons I've been wanting to talk to you for so long, is to write, but even before that, before you actually started making videos, is because you were the only other person, other than me, who understood the serial killer Psy-Op. It's something that's not talked about enough.
Yeah.
It's something I think the serial killer crazes of the 1970s, Son of Sam, and David Berkowitz in New York, the Yorkshire Rippers that lived in England, and going right back to things like this, the Black Dahlia in Hollywood, there's always a Hollywood connection, Manson family, is that these were the proto-terrorists in terms of terrifying a population, terrifying people into compliance. I mean, you know, John List in New Jersey, who murdered his family, they were still terrified 10 years. The parents used to say to their kids, if you don't do what you're told, John List is going to get you, right?
Yeah.
So they were the proto-terrorists, and then suddenly, after 1980, I think Dennis Nielsen was probably the last. There were no more serial killers at that level. There was a few.
Not of such a
Night Stalker,
level.
and they got caught.
Yes.
And they were prosecuted as lunatics.
Pretty quickly.
Yeah. And then we went into the age of the terrorist. We had those, IRA bombers, people like Mad Dog McGlinchey and Rose Dugdale. They were portrayed as the same way as the terrorists. And now we have the Muslims. And we had one. So it's this. That was the emerging Psy-Op. Now, can you tell me what your feelings about that?
To me, I've always said it's like the phenomena of serial killers. I just don't believe that there is a phenomenon. I believe it's very much orchestrated, it's constructed, and it to me it's one of the original Psy-Ops. It was very, very clever. I mean, I remember, I'm not really old enough to remember the terror that was instilled in people during the days of the Yorkshire Ripper, but I do remember as soon as the Suffolk Strangling started to happen, and I'd be on my way home from work. It was around winter time when it started, and I would be absolutely paranoid, petrified, and sort of kind of rushing home as quick as I could, just in case, And there is that psychological torment. The streets are empty. The streets are completely empty. Women absolutely petrified, men petrified that their wives are going to be hurt. You change your behaviour. Everybody in society changes their behaviour because of this level of utter fear. And to me, that's only come from one place. It's been orchestrated on a huge scale. I mean, how much more terrifying could it be than the likes of Ted Bundy and the boogeyman creeping into your house at night and killing you in the safety and sanctum of your own home?
And Bundy was allowed to escape once.
Bundy was allowed to escape, and if anybody knows the story of how he escaped through a 7-inch hole that he'd created in the ceiling. Now, I understand that he's lost a huge amount of weight, but my size, for instance, I'm 5 foot, way under 8 stone. I wouldn't fit through that. It's a joke.
In fact, there was an X-Files, a TV show, The X-Files.
Yes.
A lot of those stories are actually, the consultants were CIA people.
Yeah.
And there was one scene of a guy who had the ability to serial killer,
Tombs.
and he gets a tomb. It was Tombs, yeah.
Tombs.
Yeah, and that was definitely them giving us the finger, saying that's sure, that's how people think about it.
That's the only X-Files
We let him out.
Still now scares the life out of me. Creep under the door, through the drains. Yeah.
Because they believe that not even a prison couldn't hold a serial killer.
Yeah.
In fact, I have a friend who's a Scotland Yard detective, and he was involved in South London CID, and they arrested a notorious paedophile, psychopath, serial killer, child killer, and he told me at 70 years old he could still jump from the ground up into a narrow ledge, only a few inches wide, like a coving, and perch up there, and he would masturbate 20 times a day. So they're different.
Yeah.
And when they identified these people, even when they were created by the intelligence services, such as Berkowitz absolutely was. they were doing the social engineering. You mentioned the Suffolk Strangler. In the Yorkshire Ripper days, they would play the tape constantly of the alleged Ripper tape, and the horrific part of all was the destroyed communities.
Yes.
You would have women, their boyfriend would be out with a few drinks with their mates, or her husband, come home late, and she was to call the coppers and say, my husband's the Ripper. Oh, he was the Ripper.
Yeah.
So it destroyed them. And also when you have feminists from London coming up, with like posh, stately home accents, holding up signs saying, defend women of Yorkshire, you will no longer be killed by your men.
Yeah.
You have that. So wreck men and women, wreck dating, wreck trust, wreck romance, wreck community, and the fear comes in. And the reason why I started looking at the serial killer stuff originally is because there was shag all on corporate psychopaths back then. There was nothing.
Yeah.
And there was all the violent psychopath stuff, like the profiles of Bundy, and books like such as Yallop's Delivers from Evil, and the work of Terry Morey on the Berkowitz in the Process Church. I initially approached it just only to get information regarding what psychopaths are from the criminal profiling and the criminal psychology profiling. But it was apparent to me that all these writers, every one of their books ended with an ellipsis, like this is not all there is.
Yeah.
So what got you into the serial killer stuff initially?
It was really my own personal fascination. I've always been a people watcher. I'm fascinated by the psychology of human beings, just people in general. And I was just absolutely drawn to it from somewhere. I don't even exactly know where the fascination came from. I was just drawn to it from my granddad was on one of the juries during one of the Grey Twins trials. So obviously started to get out of interest in that, looking into the Grey Twins and seeing where that came from and realising how deeply rooted into the system these two boys were. And I just found the stories of these people fascinating. I try to get into the mindset of how these people are capable of this kind of behaviour, and what makes them so different from us. Because most people faced with some sort of horrific crime scene would be physically ill, probably faint. A lot of people just wouldn't be able to cope with it. And it carried on, and the more documentaries I watched, and the more just, I'd see snippets of programmes, and it just became so obvious that this was a huge psychological experiment on people. And I think the continuation, something that's come to me literally in the last few days, is the continuation of this is how they manipulated dating websites, the terror, the stories that come out of online dating, women who've been murdered because they've met someone online. It's a huge
and they're always elite dating sites or millionaire dating sites.
Yeah. Come and meet these rich men and women who will give you this amazing life, and this poor woman got sucked in, she fell into it, and she was murdered horrifically. They're now using that to instill terror, because people don't go out on dates anymore in ordinary circumstances because they're so busy and rare. So now your murderers are hunting women.
It's this continuation of the cyberspace.
Absolutely.
But ultimately it's the continuation into your mind.
Yes.
Because it's the war. The online dating thing is fascinating to me, because I used to be involved, I'll never do it again, it's a massive mistake, being involved in these psychopath recovery groups.
Yes.
I now believe that many of the women on those groups were not telling the truth, and I suspect some of them were involved in whipping up exactly what you're talking about through my popularity at the time.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was, I met this guy on this dating group, or that dating group, and he was a psychopath, same kind of thing. Through my investigations of these women, some of them had very interesting political backgrounds.
Right.
Socialist Workers' Party, involved. One of them was a gay guy involved in a contractor who was an NSA contractor in New England. A lot of this kind of thing. And so I was starting to figure out quite quickly that the Psy-Op was everywhere.
Yeah.
To destroy all relationships between men and women. There's no good in them.
Yeah.
It was almost like feminism 2.0.
Yeah.
All men are murderers, rapists, killers, misogynists, and all women are eternally victims.
Yeah.
And that was a big part of that. And that's why when you came along, you're obviously someone, and I know loads of women like you that they don't swallow the bullshit.
Yeah.
But what you said about, I want to talk about a few things about that. Is so interesting because ultimately these Psy-Ops, they begin and end in human consciousness.
Yes.
Because they're really about creating the monsters of the dark. Like, you look at the work of Bruno Bettelheim, you look at books like the uses of enchantment, how fairy tales were used to traumatize children, to scare them of monsters, but often the monsters were never rich people, they were never the kings and queens. And that's why, even with this new Jack, I want to talk about this new Jack the Ripper find that he was a Polish butcher.
Yeah.
I think that's a pile of crap.
Oh, it's absolutely nonsense.
Just go and tell me about that.
Well, for a start, they actually, you've got the money shot in the papers of the shawl being held up, this shawl that they've used to test DNA, which realistically, anybody who knows anything about DNA, even just through watching basic things on the Crime Channel, they show you all the forensics. There wouldn't be any validation to what they've tested if this shawl is real. It's been exposed to the elements for 100 odd years. It wouldn't have any value whatsoever. And if it was to be used in a court case, if it was a historical court case, for instance, and this was the piece of evidence that they were going to use against the person in the dock, it would be completely inadmissible. They wouldn't be able to use it because the DNA is corrupted.
Especially that age.
Yeah, I think people have been getting closer and closer to the true nature of Jack the Ripper and how closely related he will. I'll guarantee he will be closely related to either the royal family or the establishment somewhere along the way.
Oh, it's just Prince Eddie is still the prime suspect.
Yeah, and I think they needed to put an end to it before somebody went, boom, it's him.
Yeah, especially in the post-Savile era.
Yes.
My work, I'm convinced Savile was at least complicit as a serial killer.
Yes. Oh, without doubt.
There's nothing but photographs of him with the royal families.
Yeah.
So they have to.
They're having to
as much as
distance
possible,
themselves
yeah.
again because we're getting so close with the paedophile rings, with the serial killings, with the murdering.
Yeah.
It's getting so close to the top of the chain. So the rich and powerful,
yeah.
They need to slam it straight back down to the ground. And what better way to do it than with this tale of Jack the Ripper, this mysterious case that's gone on for decades and decades and decades.
I would even put my super heavy-duty tinfoil hat on and say that they kept pushing the idea that he was a Jewish immigrant.
Yeah.
And this immediately came about following the Gaza stuff, where there was a lot of people who were very anti-Israel, and quite a lot of anti-Semitism was whipped up. And it would have just tied in nicely that you bring this guy out as a Jewish butcher, and therefore all the people who are quite rightly upset about the disgusting carry-on in Gaza can say, oh, it's just typical of what they're like.
Yeah.
And if you look in the past, there's been a lot of the serial killers are often portrayed as immigrants. One of the other suspects is a Irish doctor.
Mm-hmm.
It's always like the immigrant, and that came at the height of the IRA bombings in the 70s.
Yeah.
I mean, they have us. You are so played for a laugh. You have to watch everything.
Yeah.
That is fantastic. Now, tell me, when we're having lunch, you told me about that other guy, which I don't know a lot about, the three letters.
BTK.
Tell us what BTK is.
BTK is a man named Dennis Rader, and he was heavily involved in his local church. He wasn't a minister, but he was kind of the guy in charge of looking after the church and the community. Gosh, off the top of my head.
Was it American or British?
American,
okay.
Yeah, in America. I can't remember the actual city itself, but he was in America. And the murders started in the 70s, and he murdered a family of immigrants, 3 children and the parents, and they were at home, and he literally walked in the back door, and he would explain it as taking them down. He would say, and I walked into this room, and after I'd taken them down, I went into the next room and took them down. And that was the only murder that he committed that was a group of people in one go. Every other murder that was committed, he went into other homes where there were children in the homes, but he never went on to murder any more families. just the mother. It was always the mother, and he would lock the children in another room, and he would sit his victim down and give them a glass of water and give them a cigarette and say, look, I've got a sexual problem, I am going to kill you, this is what I'm going to do to you, just take a minute to relax, have a drink and smoke and we'll chat and then we'll get started. So he would methodically sit down and explain to them. But
that was the civil servant in him coming out.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about Dennis Rader, was that he worked for local government.
Yep.
He was in charge of making sure people's grass was cut to the right length, and he would measure it with a ruler, and literally 2 millimetres out, and you would get a ticket. Yep. He would steal people's dogs. He had a real vendetta against people in the neighbourhood that had dogs, and dogs would regularly go missing because he just didn't like them.
And you had Dennis Nielsen, over here in London.
Yeah,
he was in the SWP, anti-Nazi League, and when he wasn't hunting down racist, misogynists and homophobes, he was taking gay guys home, homeless gay guys back, murdering them, having sex with dead bodies, and flushing them down the toilet.
Oh, he would sit them
and then justify, dead bodies were often held there for days, and justified it by saying that no one else cared about him.
Yes.
And he was a bureaucrat.
And he worked for local government in the Department of for Work and Pensions. It's now called, but it was the Social Security in those days.
Yeah, and if you look at Hollywood movies about serial killers, they're always portrayed as sort of unemployed rednecks, dregs, hillbillies. They all have Sutcliffe had a stable job. That was a very high-paying job back then. Long-distance lorry driver, which was a very high-paying job in the 70s. It was not. It was a high-skilled job that had this difficult to get into.
And children,
a very attractive, normal wife, and he had a nice, comfortable, middle-class lifestyle. And the rest were builders, contractors. It just goes on and on. And that's. I always remember the thing that I had a friend in New York years ago, and he was interested in serial killers too. And we were sitting down talking about it. And he gave me a copy of a magazine called Omni, which was kind of like a. It would have been what our movement is in a magazine back then.
Right.
It wasn't a bit of science fiction, a bit of kind of conspiracy, a bit of psychology, a bit of psychiatry, a bit of science, genetics and stuff. It was actually a brilliant magazine. And there was an article about serial killers, and I always remember it was what is a serial killer, where you must define it. And one of the conclusions was they always appear in industrial Western cultures. And where do all the terrorists appear? Industrialized Western nations.
Yeah.
That shows you it's the same thing. And it's not just a manifestation of a broken or damaged society, it's been put out there.
It has absolutely been put out there. I'm adamant, and I really would stake my reputation on it, I'm that certain, because it just got every single case I looked at, more and more and more, they were all connected in one way or another. They all either had jobs within the government, they all lead really rigid lifestyles, like their everyday life, all not necessarily obsessive compulsive, but they need regime, system, and they need control. And
they generally come from a middle class or upper middle class background. And it's always a military or a political family.
Yep. It is never either working class or homeless people, or the bottom, the breadline. Never. It is always much higher up in society.
When John List lost his job as an accountant in a top New York company, the story is he pretended to spend 6 months in New York at a park, going to work every day, but yet the bills were still paid.
And they had a beautiful home. It was an incredible home.
Beautiful neighborhood.
And he even, he dropped his children at school that day, and gave them letters saying that the children would no longer be coming back to school. So why was it
so casual?
And it was a week before they found the bodies.
He put them in the basement. He killed his mother-in-law and his wife first. Put them in the basement, and the 2 kids from primary school. I think it was junior high school.
He even picked them up,
and then the older son was having soccer practice. Took him home and put some 19 bullets in his head because he couldn't kill him. And just calmly closed the door and began a new life in Colorado.
And he worked in a fast food restaurant.
And when he was found, and even at America's Most Wanted TV show that made the model of what he looks like now,
which was incredible.
But they knew who it was. It was all designed. It was all designed for him to be caught.
Absolutely. It's the same all the way through.
So we've come to the conclusion from both your years of study and my years of study, and this is something people in the alternative movement have not really gone deep into. I want you to look at things like the process church. and so on. But the reality is that the serial killers were the proto-terrorists.
Absolutely.
They were followed then by the IRA, Baader Meinhof, Red Brigade, in America, Patty Hearst on that Liberation Army, same kind of thing, and they were just testing terror tactics for the Muslims today. So don't get caught up in it and keep looking at them, because it's a Russian doll that never ends.
Yeah. And I would like to say a good starting point for people who this will seem quite overwhelming to. The best case I would recommend on an easy to digest level is the O.J. Simpson case. Look at Glenn Rogers, the actual murderer.
So tell me about the show you're going to be doing with Lou.
We're doing our radio show. It's going to be on People's Internet Radio. We're going to be doing it on a Thursday night at midnight, and we've chosen that slot because it means we can be a lot freer with the kind of language we use, because Lou doesn't really get the opportunity to swear, and obviously, I'm quite fond of the odd swear word. And
also, a lot of people are not aware of what a great girl Lou is.
She's fantastic, and Lou has to be she has to be very professional in the comment.
How much fun she is to be around.
She is incredible fun. We've become very close really quickly. She's a great girl, and we've decided to call the show No Holds Barred, because that's exactly what we want to be.
Good.
We just want to say it exactly how it is, and Midnight gives us the opportunity to be able to do that.
Midnight what day?
It will start on October the 2nd, Thursday night.
Thursday night,
and we'll be on every week. We're going to have guests some weeks, and then other weeks it will just be me and Lou. And we just want to really be able to let go and say exactly how it is without constraints.
And that's why I and thousands of people were so excited when you showed up, because it was finally, here comes the next generation of normal, ordinary, or special, but I mean normal, the kind of person you can leave the supermarket, So that's going to be fantastic. I'm delighted about that, and thank you for this opportunity, for this conversation, because I've wanted to have this ever since you started talking about it. So, Danielle la Verite, no, she's not the robot.
No, I'm not a robot.
And thanks very much, and many more strings to your bow. Okay?
Thank you, Thomas.